Ladies and gentlemen, we will now be starting with our next technical session. Business valuations are a powerful driver of how you manage business. And in this age, where businesses are reaching new heights of innovation and effectiveness every day, business valuation allows us to understand the subtle dynamics of business and make informed decisions. We have with us today CA Chandar Sone, who will be demystifying regulatory rules of business valuation.
I request CA Kalpa Vruksh, past chairman Belgavi branch, to escort our distinguished speaker onto the dais and welcome him with a book. Ladies and gentlemen, a huge round of applause to our speaker, CA Chandar Sone. Welcome, sir. Mr. Chandar Sone is a seasoned professional, is the fellow member of ICAI, ICSI, and also a registered valuer of IBBI. He has exposure of undertaking almost 1,000 valuations of eminent clients across industries. He is the co-author of India's first comprehensive book on valuation under the new regulated regime, Business Valuation in India. In fact, he has served as a member of the Central Government Committee to advise on valuation matters constituted by the MCA. Ladies and gentlemen, once again, put your hands together for CA Chandar Sone. Over to you, sir.
Good afternoon, everyone. Post-lunch session, always difficult. So first of all, I would like to thank the Karnataka Association of Chartered Accountants. My special thanks to Shiva Prakash and Mr. Shetty, who had invited me to this August gathering. My focus would be to share my experiences, because no presentation can teach us the wisdom of any of a professional art. So I have about 14 years of experience with me. I qualified in 2015. And almost most of this experience has been into valuations and M&A and transaction advisory. So before I start my formal presentation, let me just try to give you my perspective of the ecosystem of valuation in India. Because presentation will always fall short. But we should take home that how the ecosystem of valuation is driving in India. So if you look at, we all have been doing valuations since the last 6 decades. The first topic of valuation, if you look at, then you have to go back to the Wealth Tax Act 1957. From that Wealth Tax Act till now, the valuation has evolved mainly in the last 1.5 decades. So I have been blessed and fortunate to see my journey with the valuation journey, because my experience is also that much limited. But from the formula-driven valuation, which was, if you would have, the earlier members would have known of earlier erstwhile CCI guidelines, Comptroller of Capital Issue Guidelines, which got abolished in the year 1989. So from 57 till 89, the only source of guidance on valuation was CCI guidelines, wherein it was told that if all of us have to do valuation, we all have to do a book value and a formula-driven PECV, earning capitalization value. The value remains same. If there are 1,000 valuers here, about, other than formula mistake, most of the valuation numbers would remain same. So what has changed? In 1992, SEBI came, and SEBI changed the market-driven valuation. The merchant bankers started doing valuations basis the comparable companies, which happens even today. More complex valuations came, like which we do and call as discounted cash flow models, wherein judgment of a valuer is very important. If you look at a valuation and you try to look into an Excel sheet, it looks like it's very simple. However, the role, the judgment, the experience of a valuer is the differentiator when it comes a good valuation and a bad valuation. If you look into some US, I mean, US has been doing valuation since like 100 years now. And there you will find more complex judgments. There is a Delaware court in US, and that Delaware, there is a discussion on different aspects of valuation there. So I recall one judgment wherein a judge said that it's the thought process which one wants to follow. If everyone has done valuation and everyone might have arrived at a same or similar number, but what is the process you have followed? Whether you have enough documentation, whether you have enough thought process in how you have reached out to a number. The process is more important than the number actually, because the number can be given by a calculator or an Excel sheet. That is what distinguishes between a good valuer and a small valuer, individual and firms, and so on and so forth. Now what is happening, that regulatory landscape is changing very fast. And we have seen that valuation is also asymmetrical, because today there are no valuation standards. There are ICAI valuation standards which came in 2018, but those are not the regulated standards by the government of India. Those are the standards which are to be applied by the chartered accountants. But there are other professionals also who are doing valuations. So what has happened, that the government is seized of this matter, and I happen to be a part of the MCA committee also. So let me just tell you that there are two committees which are made by the central government today on valuation. One committee is making the valuation standards in India. They have already framed a draft report. That draft report is given to the Ministry of Corporate Affairs. That committee is made by IBBI. And second committee is looking into the institutionalization of valuation profession. And very shortly, as I understand, like there is a Chartered Accountant Act, there is a Company Secretary Act, there is going to be a Valuation Act. And today, like CA, it's not that CA Institute has a monopoly on valuation or CS, because CAs are large in number, so obviously we have kind of monopoly in all the things, because the numbers is huge. But going forward, the reporting will be to an independent authority. There is also expected to be a graduate level exam, wherein people, I mean, when I passed chartered accountancy 15 years back, I mean, there was nothing that was learnt about valuation. So whatever we learnt is more in practice. Even today, there is some elective courses or some guidance, financial management and all, but I would say that there is no hardcore valuation teaching which one needs to learn in practice. So some kind of courses are coming which can be done by graduates, where because talent is very scarce in valuation. If you want to add people, you will not find to add people. So young team is getting developed. The valuation standards are being made, and registered valuer rules already came in 2017. There is a code of conduct which one has to follow. There is a process of valuation which one has to follow. Everything is written and codified, and there are stringent penalties. So what is happening, that so long for the last 6 decades, we have been doing valuations. But now it is taking the form of a profession. So before I just start my presentation, it's also important that when as chartered accountants we are doing appeal cases, valuation has now been started questioning. So the income tax officers are now questioning on the projections you are making, whether you are making or your clients are making. So a lot of to and fro is happening. And just I would like to summarize that business valuation is beyond the numbers. We don't need to look into the specific numbers of it. There is a lot of things that go into play. So I'll just try to cover during my presentation, and after the presentation we can take up any of the sessions. Yeah, so we'll be taking these overview of valuation. So my topic assigned was demystifying regulatory rules, but I thought that could be very monotonous. So I have extended the presentation at my liberty, and we'll be taking overview of valuation, regulatory valuations in India, valuation approaches, valuation under specific situations, judicial pronouncements. So first of all, whatever we buy and sell in market is a pricing, not a valuation. The role of a valuer is to do an intrinsic valuation of a company. And if I say it in the words of Mr. Warren Buffett's, price is what you pay and value is what you get. But in practice, most of the time, when transactions are happening, price is already known and you have to arrive at a valuation. So everyone is doing a correct valuation because everybody knows what is the price. The client tells you the price. The differentiating factor is the process and the documentation. So if you look into, like the law of economics, the valuation also differs. The choice of valuation methodologies differs upon the stage of your business. So if a stage of your business is startup companies, there are practically no turnover, no profits. What can you do? You have to look into a future business model and you have to look into the qualitative aspects of management. We often do probability based valuations for startups because every startup wants to become a Flipkart and Snapdeal or Ola or Uber. But whether it succeeds or not, it's very difficult to say. That's why we do a success scenario valuation, we do a failure scenario valuation, we do a normal scenario valuation. As in more you grow up, if you are a growing company, you have something on the balance sheet and projections. If you are a mature company, we rely more on your asset side of a balance sheet. Because as a chartered accountant, we know that either there is assets of a business or there is profits of a business. These two things are fundamental. And third thing is the market, the comparable thing. So the more we go up, the more importance is given to the assets of the company. Like in case of declining companies, the last stage, I can also call it as an IBC valuation. The emphasis is more on the assets of the company. The more it is down, it is more on the future cash flows, and in the middle it's a combination of your cash flows and also your assets. In the year 1959-1960, the oldest ruling of valuation came by the IRS of USA. And if you read into these 8 points which came in 1959, these tell you how a valuation should be done. So the first is, what is the nature of business and what is the history of enterprise? Whether the company has grown as 4% or 15% or 40%. How old is the company? You need to go back. You don't need to start from the cash flows. You need to go back, apply your mind before working on the cash flows. What is the economic outlook in general? Today we know India is going through a bad phase. Even internationally it's a bad phase. It is difficult to expect a 20% growth for the next 10 years. A company can be a cyclical company. A sugar company cannot create a long-term incremental cash flows. There will be swings up and down, up and down. So you need to understand the economy, you need to understand the industry. Like we say, there is, as I recall, there is a, in accounting, we say knowledge of business is very important. This is essentially the same. You need to understand the business. What is the book value of a stock? I can say it is an asset methodology. What is the earning capacity of a company? What is earning capacity? From where we get earning capacity? We get from the P&L account. So it is a profit based module. What is the dividend paying capacity? I mean, you can look at, if a company has given more dividends, then it is considered highly valuable. If a company buybacks the shares, if a company gives the dividend, if a company acquires, all these things increase the cash flows of a company. So whenever the cash flows of a company will increase, the valuation of the company will increase. Goodwill or intangible valuation. Is there a goodwill? You need to look into that. The sale of a stock and size of the block of stock. Size of the block means that if there is a 2% stake, if there is a 2% stake which you have to transfer, and if there is a 100% stake you have to transfer, both can be very differently valued. Because 2% stake, 4% stake, 14% stake is a minority valuation. 51% stake, 76% stake, 100% stake is a controlling valuation. So, and the last is market price of stock. That means how is the market valuing? I mean, every company comes to us and builds a model that it is the first company in the world who is making that model. And the valuation can come 100 times of turnover. And you will stamp and you will say, company will say, I have done You have to just stamp. Because all clients are very intelligent. They say, we have done, sir, everything. You have to just stamp. The problem is you need to look at similar size companies, or it may not be similar size, similar industry. What is the kind of multiple, top line multiple, turnover multiple, EBITDA multiple, PAT multiple, kitna aa raha hai? If a similar company in industry is getting a 1 time of sales multiple and my company DCF is giving me a 40 times of sales multiple, I must try to open my eyes and look at probably the model which is prepared is not a sanitized model. So if you look into only the Excel model, you will always fail. And the kind of risk this valuation is coming, because valuation is a very lucrative business. I know many people who only do valuation. I do only valuation for the last 15 years. I have not done anything else. There is so much potential. Like there is transfer pricing, like there is IBC. All of us can be doing this stuff, but give it time and commitment. Like any other profession, give it time and commitment. Most of the chartered accountants are doing it as an add-on thing, as an offset of their main practice. Maybe you need to give more justice to the valuation. Otherwise, I see a lot of risk happening. Like there are a lot of chartered accountants who have been questioned for audits. The question is now taking place on the credit rating reports. No chartered accountant is questioned for valuation because there is no law on valuation. After this Valuation Act, nobody is going to be spared. So just if we look at 1959 ruling, these 8 points tell us the fundamental of valuation, which we must keep in mind before doing. And wherever there are different valuation methodologies and they are giving us different numbers, we should try to reconcile. The problem is somewhere the regulator has written that you have to do valuation as per DCF. So you only apply DCF, you don't look at any other thing. That's wrong. Then you are not applying your mind, and maybe you are getting prone, because tomorrow if something happens, the client will say, boss, it is your problem, you have done this. No client helps a professional when things go wrong. So essentially there is legal recognition now, there is a regulated profession, there are uniform practice and valuation standards. It requires skill set and capacity building. There are so many things available. There are books on valuation, there are standards on valuation, there are international standards on valuation. Read and build capacity. Even I am seeing the number of conferences which I have attended in the last 3 years are maybe 10 times more than I have attended in my first 11 years of profession. Because now people are interested in valuation, and code of conduct is also there. So just to take you through a summary of registered valuer rules, it came into force on 18th of October 2017. There is an eligibility condition, a 3-year chartered accountant who gives an examination, right? After undergoing it, 50 hours training, is entitled to become a registered valuer. There are 3 asset classes. For us, it is securities and financial assets. There is land and building, and there is plant and machinery also, which is not for chartered accountants. There is a concept of RVOs, like ICAI RVO is there, ICSI RVO is there. Until and unless the valuation standards are getting framed, we need to follow the international valuation standards. Additionally, there are also ICAI RVO valuation standards which are additional. And there is a little difference in international valuation standards and ICAI valuation standards. The contents of valuation report is prescribed. The maintenance of records has to be done for 3 years. There has to be professional competence, due care and independence, and there is a model code of conduct. If you look into the contents, then these are the specific contents which must be there in any valuation report. So you need to mention background information, purpose of valuation. Mostly as professionals, we do not ask what is the purpose of valuation. A client gives you a call, sir, valuation karana hai. And we say, acha, DCF laga do. If you don't try it, where is this valuation report getting used? You are putting yourself at risk. If a valuation is being asked for income tax, that should not be used under FEMA law. If it is asked under FEMA law, that should not be used under Companies Act. Your report needs to write specifically the usage, and that is a part of the, so purpose is very important. Maybe you can get, in fact, the regulatory position is such that for the same transaction you require multiple reports. As a registered valuer, you have to give report. As a merchant banker, you have to give report. Under FEMA, you have to give a different report, so purpose is important. Any conflict, interest, your date of appointments, all the important things needs to be mentioned. Just read the last underline. Generally, there are a lot of caveats in our report. There are a lot of limitations. You can give caveats and limitations, but you cannot limit your responsibility. The meaning of this is, sometimes client will not give you data, but you have to give the valuation. So if you give the valuation without the data, you are taking a risk. If you are not satisfied that under this limitation, if you think you are unable to form an opinion, do not give a report. If you give a report, make sure that you can justify what happens. I mean, this is the verbatim copy of the registered value rules. It is telling us that probably government is asking the professionals to be more serious in their conduct. The problem is that valuation is a very new concept. So maybe in the initial period, I expect some leniency, but going forward, you need to be very sure of it. One important area besides registered valuer is Ind AS. Any company which is converging to Ind AS has to do a fair value accounting. And Ind AS 113, everyone should read who is interested. Ind AS 113 is a dedicated standard and the only standard on fair value in India. So it tells you how you should do fair value, when you should use a market approach, when you should use an income approach. In fact, it gives a hierarchy of levels of value, level 1, 2, 3. It says that you should give importance to observable inputs. What is an observable? Which is seen. I mean, my company is a listed company, market price is 20 rupees, it is frequently traded. Why do you need to apply a discounted cash flow model? It is very clearly written that it is 20 rupees. My DCF can give me 100 rupees, it is not relevant. If my company is unlisted company, I can compare my company vis-a-vis the listed companies. It is level 2. And level 3 is actually your discounted cash flow, where everything is formula driven, future driven. You do not know whether that is going to happen or not. And these all standards specifically like Ind AS 109, 107 and 32 relate to financial instruments. So these are all we do it in practice. I mean, when you have to value an ESOP, then for valuing an ESOP, you need to understand the volatility, you need to understand the historical performance. There is a specific standard 102. And these all most of us would have read. So when any of a valuation is coming, if we go through these standards, it is going to help us. Based on our experience, this is a recommended process of valuation which one should follow. So one should start with understanding the purpose of valuation. Basis the purpose of valuations, one should ask the information from the client. Then before doing a valuation, you should do some kind of financial analysis, some kind of financial ratios. Look into 2-3 year balance sheet. Look into whether there is an auditor qualification or not. Sometimes the valuation which we are doing on numbers is a qualified report. And if we take the impact of qualification, if we take the impact of contingent liabilities, the value could be very different. I have seen people not putting their brain, looking into a 2-page summary, P&L account and balance sheet, applying a multiple or DCF and throwing a number. Reading the complete annual report is important. Sometimes we find exceptional items which are not recurring in nature. So you need to normalize. When you do a comparable company valuation, what do? You say that my profit is 100 and the comparable companies are getting a 10 times of profit. Now what if your profit is not 100? If your profit, 100 profit has 80 rupees exceptional item, sale of land. Sale of land will go in a P&L account, right? The profit on sale of land. So that profit, actually the normalized profit is only 20 rupees. So a person who would have normalized would have valued 20 into 10, 200. A person who would not have valued, how much would be the valuation in that case? 100 multiplied by 10. So 800 rupees, 80% difference is coming, right? So normalization is very important. Understanding industry characteristics. Whatever client says, there is no two companies are perfect, but companies do fall in an industry. when we were doing a lot of e-commerce valuations in the year 2007, 8, 9, 10, there were not enough. In fact, there was no e-commerce company which was a comparable company. Any thought what we could have done in that kind of scenario? Whereas there is no company in India which is a comparable company. What can we do? How can we compare? Yes? Go to US, correct. So US is the place to be. There are lot many companies, NASDAQ listed companies, NYSE listed companies, like Alibaba. The only difference is that US today is a matured economy. The way Indian Flipkart, Indian Snapdeal, Uber and Ola are growing, they are not growing that much in US. So they get less multiples, maybe 2x of sales multiples they get in US. In India, you get as much as 10x of sales multiple. As we speak, Infibeam is one company which is listed. Just Dial is one company which is listed. So as the time is going, the data is becoming strengthened. But one problem I face in valuation in India is that we do not have reliable data. Our softwares are not very, if you look into a Capital IQ software, I mean Capital IQ software is, you have to pay 15 lakh rupees for buying that software, subscription of that software. It gives you the future multiples and forward multiples and industry reports. And 15 lakhs is too much. Every year, you are not buying that. So there are low cost softwares also available, which you can get at 50, like Capital Line, some people would be using, Ace Equity is there, ProS is there, right? So these kind of software are also good softwares, which at least sanitize the data, right? Once you have done all the normalization, you have understood the industry, you can now come to forecasting, which is actually the role of a management. A chartered accountant, a valuer should not forecast the projections. He is prohibited to forecast the projections. The projections must be made by the client company, must be reviewed by the chartered accountant or a valuer. So it is not our role to make the projections. You can charge separately and you can make, that's a different thing. But when you will make, you will actually not be a valuer, because then your bias will come in. When you have made the projections, you have to justify the projections anyways, right? Once the forecasting and reviewing is done, then you have to choose which is the methodology I have to apply. And then there are some valuation adjustments. So transaction valuation, regulatory valuation, financial reporting valuation, you must understand. Whether you are doing a short-term valuation, if you are buying shares of a company for trading purpose, you are not going to do a discounted cash flow. Maybe a technical analysis, RBI has cut the rates, Yes Bank limit is frozen. So if Yes Bank limit is frozen, then everyone is dumping the stock. So it is not a long term, maybe tomorrow government takes over and the company can become stable company. It happened to Satyam. When Satyam news came, I think it came down to 9 rupees. Slowly and steadily in 3, 4, 5 years, it came back to 120, 150 rupees. So long term and short term will always be different. You need to understand why you are doing the valuation. Whether you are a minority shareholder, you are a financial investor, or you are a strategic investor is very important. The levels of value is going to change. If a person wants to acquire the company, he is going to give you control premium. He is going to give you synergy premium also. If a person is getting only 1%, 2% share, he is not going to give you other than what a comparable company can get. And we must know, are we doing an enterprise value, which is value of a company, or we are doing an equity value, which is value of a shareholders. So if we look into the regulatory requirements, then this summary sheet tells you that the valuation ecosystem in India is complex as of now, and there are valuation requirements for fresh issue of shares, for transfer of shares, for insolvency and bankruptcy code, for NDAs, for business combinations, and for ESOP and sweat equity. So what I have just tried to create a summary of different transactions and basis the different transactions which all regulators ask for it. For example, if you are doing a transfer of shares, then Companies Act has no valuation requirement. And let me tell you, the law of the land overrides the valuation standards. The valuation standards write clearly that the law of the land will override the standards. So if a valuation standard is saying that you have to follow all three approaches and give a weighted average value, but the income tax law is telling you, section 5627B, Redwill Rule 11 UA, that you have to apply a discounted cash flow. Then you have to apply a discounted cash flow. So mostly you see the small and medium practitioners are getting regulatory valuations, and that is why their main focus is in terms of following the specific methodologies, whether it's a transfer of share, whether it's a issue of shares. So we must know which law asks for which valuation, and whether as a chartered accountant I am authorized to do it, whether as a registered valuer I am authorized to do it, or maybe I have to get it done through a merchant banker. Are there any formula prescribed for that, or I have to apply my own wisdom? What are the guidelines? It must be known. So I'll just run it through all the different, this all is given in the publication as well. What we have done, that first the governing provisions are mentioned, the first row. Second is the valuation methodologies, and third is who can do valuation. So you are all taking that book home, the souvenir, and therein this presentation is already published. So whenever any valuation comes under any of that, you can just refer. And please make sure that, because this is today, tomorrow it can change also. There are so many changes that, so just look, make sure that there is no updation. Like just to give you an example, under Companies Act, the valuation can only be done by a registered valuer. So if you are not a registered valuer, you cannot do it. There are no valuation, it is written you have to do as per the registered valuer rules, which we just discussed, that you have to follow the valuation standards, you have to follow the code of conduct and everything. Under Income Tax Act, there is issue of shares and there is transfer of shares. So just look at it, I have not mentioned transfer of shares under Companies Act. The meaning of that is there is no valuation requirement. So only where there is a valuation requirement, I have created a slide for that. So Companies Act, only the issue of shares, there is a valuation requirement, and Companies Act writes actually shares and convertible instruments. So if it is a compulsorily convertible or it's a optionally convertible, both cases you require valuation under Companies Act. Income Tax Act, you have to follow a discounted cash flow or a net asset value method. Income tax, you require valuation, there is a maximum value and there is a minimum value. So whenever there is a discounted cash flow, that can only be done by a merchant banker if you are using a discounted cash flow model. If you are not using a discounted cash flow model, a chartered accountant can very well do the valuation. When there is a transfer of shares, there is a minimum valuation which is prescribed, and that minimum valuation is adjusted breakup value model. So there is a formula driven valuation, you have to arrive at that valuation, and that is the base valuation. Interestingly, who has to do valuation here? For quoted shares and unquoted equity share, not prescribed. So sometimes people think that only a merchant banker can do valuation under income tax, but for transfer of shares, chartered accountant can very well do valuations. You can note it down, because many clients come to us and say that you are merchant bankers, we want valuation. Even chartered accountants are permitted to do valuation for transfer of shares under the income tax. Maybe a merchant banker is more, assessing officer is more inclined in looking at a merchant banker report. So where the size of the transaction is more, he may ask for a merchant banker report. Legally speaking, chartered accountants can very well do. And any query in this, if it is coming, you can also ask me. I mean, I can just get it resolved. Then other than transfer of shares and issue of shares, there is capital gain purpose, section 50 CA, wherein when you are transferring shares, then under 50C you need to, so 50 CA actually prescribes the same valuation which is for transfer of shares, the adjusted breakup value method. Under transfer pricing also there is a valuation. So there are no formulas which is prescribed in 50 CA, no formula prescribed in 92C which is transfer pricing. You have to apply your mind and think which is the suitable valuation methodology. There is an indirect transfer of shares wherein the shares of the company are not getting transferred, but indirectly the shares of a holding company are getting transferred, like a Vodafone case. So there in that case also there is a valuation requirement and some adjustments are there. So all the valuation models, when you look into regulatory models, you need to look into the specific requirement. Like just to give you an example, this section 9 valuation when you do, then section 9 valuation asks you to do adjustment of debt in the valuation. So there is a specific inclusion of that line, so you have to make that adjustment. So just read the valuation regulation before doing that. Then when you do an FDI RBI valuation, if there is an investment coming from outside India, then RBI does not recognize registered valuer. So just to make it simple, wherever the valuation is being done under Companies Act or Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, 2 places registered valuer is mandatory as of now. Whenever it comes to income tax, merchant banker, some places it is mandatory, some places it is recommended. When it comes to RBI, RBI says chartered accountant can do, cost accountant can do, or a merchant banker can do. So there could be a transaction where an issue of share is taking place and you require 2 valuations. For the same transaction, you need a registered valuer valuation under the Companies Act. You need a merchant banker valuation under the Income Tax Act. And under RBI, either the chartered accountant can give or a merchant banker can give. So if you want to give as a chartered accountant under RBI, registered valuer under Companies Act, and merchant banker under income tax, you need 3 valuations for the same transaction. So client is actually getting stressed at this level. Hey, boss, why should I pay you for 3 valuations? And maybe when the Valuation Act comes, then going forward we'll look at all the valuations, because earlier merchant banker was not there, it was chartered accountant or merchant banker, but we know that a year back the name of the chartered accountant was struck down for whatever reasons by CBDT. So it is expected that going forward a registered valuer should be doing all kind of valuations, but till that time as a professionals it is good for us because we are getting more business to that. Not good for the industry, but as professionals, yes. There is a question whether there is a valuation for buyback. So under buyback there is technically no valuation under the Companies Act. However, when you say the transfer of shares, there could be a aspect that, see, buyback is a kind of relinquishment of shares, you know. So whether on buyback there should be a valuation requirement or not is a questionable point, but there is this judgment, Vora in Financial Services, ITAT judgment of Mumbai, wherein it was held that buyback valuation is not required. Just giving you these things, so if tomorrow you do a valuation and these questions come, you should be aware of that. SEBI regulations. So when there is a listed company, if there is a 10% trading volume, we call it a frequently traded company. So if a company is frequently traded, whatever is the market price, it is the correct approach. You don't need to go into beyond the market price. However, if it is infrequently traded, that means the trading volume in the script is less than 10% in a year, then you need to do a valuation independently, applying the book value, relative valuation and similar stuff. Again, under takeover code, there are certain valuation guidelines. Then let's come to merger. Sometimes scheme of mergers come to us for doing a valuation and determination of swap ratio. One need to understand that there is a difference in fundamental valuation and a relative valuation. In case of scheme of arrangement, what we are doing, we are valuing company A, we are valuing company B, and we are recommending a swap ratio basis their relative strength. Most important thing in case of a merger valuation is to apply same valuation methods. If you apply a discounted cash flow method for one company and you apply a market method for another company, the valuation will become biased, because generally the discounted cash flow value will come high, because discounted cash flow valuation is considered as a controlling stake valuation, and comparable companies valuation is considered as a minority stake valuation. So if you want to buy the shares of, say, TCS, You can buy 1 share, 2 share, 10 share, 0.5% share. You cannot buy TCS from the market. That means that you can only buy a minority share. So whatever is the price which is quoted in the market, it is a minority value. If you want to buy TCS, you have to meet Mr. Tata. And he's not going to sell that, whatever controlling stake you want to offer. So the point is that we must understand what is the exact transaction, and as per SEBI regulations, you need to give this table now. Every valuer who is giving a merger valuation needs to give this table, that what is the valuation you have arrived under asset approach, income approach and market approach. These are the only approaches of valuation whosoever does the valuation. What is the kind of weight you have given? What is the relative valuation and final share swap ratio? If you have not given valuation approach, suppose you are saying I have not applied an income approach, you need to give justifications for that. You have not applied an asset approach, you need to give justifications for that. So now this table is actually becoming a kind of valuation format which everyone should follow. And anyone who wants to read valuations practically, you can look into, there is this clause 24F of listing regulations. On BSC, there is a, if you open the BSC or NSC, then there is a scheme of arrangement section. And all the valuations of listed companies are uploaded there. So you can download those valuations. There is a fairness opinion which is given on those valuations. You can read how those valuations are done by small, medium, large firms. And it will help you in understanding the nitty-gritties of valuation. But the idea here is that if you can justify any valuation using this format, I think you have done your work. If you are unable to justify just because a value is coming more or less, so you have not applied, that means you have failed the test of valuation. If you have reasonableness of why you have not done and why you have done, it is fine. Fairness opinion, I said that yes, whenever there will be a listed company involved, there will be a fairness opinion which will be given by a merchant banker on the valuation report of the valuer. So for listed companies, there is a valuation and there is this fairness opinion. Interestingly, SEBI has also not changed the requirements. So SEBI is asking for a valuation from a chartered accountant. Companies Act is asking from a registered valuer. So practically for listed companies, the valuations are done by chartered accountants who are registered valuers. So if you are chartered accountant, you are registered valuer, and you are chartered accountant and registered valuer, then you are only authorized to do that. So as a chartered accountant practicing, taking the license of a registered valuer, it is beneficial as of now. Then when we acquire the shares of any company or when we acquire the business of any company, we do an exercise which is called as purchase price allocation. So you have bought all the assets of a company and you have given that consideration. But you have given a business valuation, like suppose there are 100 rupees of assets of a company and you have given them 140 rupees. Then what is the difference 40 rupees? Please speak. Goodwill. Any other answer? Replacement value. Sir, how? I have bought the assets of 100 rupees and I have paid 140 rupees. 40 rupees I have paid extra. Some people are saying it's goodwill. You are saying replacement value. Replacement value, basis replacement value, I have paid 140. I have paid a premium. What is that premium? What is that premium? How do you do accounting for that? You all might not be valuers, but you are accountants, right? How do you do accounting for that?
Goodwill. Sir, this goodwill used to happen prior to the Ind AS. So when in 2016 the Ind AS came, then this goodwill concept has been discontinued. Now, when you are acquiring a company and you are paying an additional amount, you are paying goodwill, correct? But goodwill cannot be accounted. Now, what can be accounted is, you have to find, there is some intangible valuation. You have to look at what is that kind of intangible. whether it is a customer contract, whether it is a brand value, whether it is a technology, whether it is some design or IPR, you have to find which are the intangibles, and basis that you have to value those intangibles. And if you can identify and value 30 rupees of intangible, the difference 10 rupees now is goodwill, which is called as balancing figure. So now there is a difference between goodwill and intangible, and this internationally purchase price allocation is a big valuation stream. There is Ind AS 38, which is on intangible asset, and there is IVS 210. IVS is International Valuation Standard, which is given by International Valuation Standard Council.
And just to give you an example, like there is a company which is acquiring companies having balance sheet size of 47 crores. 9 is the property, plant and equipment, 38 is the net current assets, and 47 I have bought. But against 47, I have paid how much? I have paid 1,398. This is a real case taken from the balance sheet of Infosys. It's not created by me. So, if you have paid one, because it's Infosys company into service industry, generally in service industry, there will not be many tangible assets. So, there has to be intangibles. Like if you value a pharma company, a generic company and a branded company has a too much difference. A brand has a different value. So, Infosys identified technology, trade name, customer contract, non-compete agreement, and the remaining was booked into goodwill. So, this is called as purchase price allocation, wherein whenever we are acquiring the company, we are supposed to find out the intangibles, identify them, and then value them. There can be a full day session on how do you value intangibles. The idea is to take home that yes, these are the practice areas which we can go it, and these are very qualitative practice areas. You can expect a very handsome amount of fees in these areas because not many people know how to do it. Valuation of sweat equity. If you are issuing shares to someone, not in cash, you have done lots of efforts and you are getting 10% shares, 5% shares. That is called as sweat equity shares. You have invested your sweat. You are not giving money, but you have invested your sweat. How do you value that? Under Companies Act, if you want to issue shares to someone, not in cash, you need to value the contribution that person has made in the company. So, one is a valuation of a company. Another is valuation of the person who is being given shares of the company. So, you will have to identify that what is the percentage of valuation which can be attributed to this person, and basis that you will issue him the shares. So, it is different from the company valuation. It can be a director of a company, a managing director of a company, who is saying, I have opened a startup, I do not have money, maybe I want to take shares later on. Valuation for ESOPs. 2 times you require valuation under ESOPs. One, when you give the employee stock options, and being Bangalore, ESOP is something you would be familiar with, that when you issue the ESOPs, then there is a grant date. That ESOP are granted at a point of time, and there has to be valuation at each grant date. Basis the grant date, if the valuation of a company comes out 100 rupees, and an employee is given the shares at 50 rupees, then 50 rupees is the compensation cost of the company, and that compensation cost is apportioned over the vesting schedule of the company. Second valuation is a perquisite valuation, which when a ESOP is exercised at that point of time, ESOP exercise time, a merchant banker has to determine the perquisite tax liability. In the recent budget, there is exemption to some eligible startups. So, if there are some eligible startups who have met the
tax guidelines, they do not pay tax. They are not supposed to pay tax until and unless the shares get sold or for a certain period of time. Similarly, the income tax valuation that we just discussed, 56 to 7B, under issue of shares, there are certain exemptions for eligible startups. Now, eligible startups are not DIPP approved startups. For being an eligible startup, you need to take a specific exemption from income tax. If you have a certificate of exemption from income tax, you can save tax on perquisites, you can also save tax on issue of shares. Valuation for financial reporting we have just discussed earlier, Ind AS 113 and observable input. Who can do valuation is not prescribed, but again, highly paying valuations, because here, see, wherever a formula is not prescribed, the valuation gains importance, because then a valuer has to apply his mind. And here, financial reporting is most important for auditors. So whatever valuations I have done, I have seen nobody questioning us. But when it comes to financial reporting, and if there are credible CA firms, any of the top 10 firms, generally they have an interest in understanding how you have done a valuation. So not every practitioner can do financial reporting valuations, but yes, it's a good area wherein you learn different nitty-gritties of it. Valuation for IBC, totally different valuation. The fundamental difference is that we are doing business valuations in all other cases, but in IBC we are doing share asset valuations. So IBC we are doing actually asset by asset. We write down a balance sheet, we value an inventory, we value stock, we value debtors, we value work in progress. So you need to go into the aging of the debtors. It is most suited for chartered accountants, because when you would have done balance sheet, you would already have seen a lot of things. IBC gives us a fair valuation of a company, a liquidation valuation of a company, but of the assets of the company. It is not an enterprise valuation. Enterprise valuation is giving you a lump sum valuation. When you are doing a purchase price allocation, then it is an itemized valuation. But in case of IBC, it is straightforward and itemized valuation. All the assets of the company needs to be valued. The liabilities of the company need not be valued in IBC. So all the assets of the company, again, this is only under the domain of registered valuers. Now coming to valuation approaches, internationally there are asset approach, income approach and market approach. Asset approach is what is in the book value of a company, what could be a replacement value of a company, like sir said, if I buy this today, how much it would be in the market, and liquidation valuation of the company. Income based approach is either capitalization of past financials, profitability, you are dealing with the income of a company, P&L account, or looking into the future cash flows of a company. In practice, discounted cash flow is applied most of the time. Market based approach, comparable market multiples. How are the similar companies valued in the market? There is comparable transaction multiple also. The difference in comparable transaction and comparable companies is that comparable companies is valuing my company, subject company, vis-a-vis the listed comparable companies. But comparable transaction companies is valuing my subject company vis-a-vis the transactions which are taking place in market. Can any of you tell me the difference between comparable companies multiple method? If I have applied a comparable companies multiple method, comparing my subject company with listed companies, and if I have also applied comparable transaction multiple method, comparing my company with certain companies wherein certain investment transaction has taken place, what would be the difference? Any of you? Try to answer right or wrong, doesn't matter. Yeah, please. So the difference basically, if you look into an market company, I told you some time back that market gives you minority price. And when a private equity player takes stake in the company, most likely it's a controlling price. So I told you that
it is sometimes, different methods give different numbers. And we fail to understand why they are giving different numbers. Some could be a controlling stake valuation, some could be a minority stake valuation. So comparable companies is a minority stake valuation. Comparable transaction is a controlling stake valuation. So both will never be same. If you are arriving at comparable companies, and you want to reach to comparable transaction, you have to add a control premium. And if you have arrived at a comparable transaction and you want to reach at a comparable companies, you have to provide a discount for lack of control. So there is a discount and there is a premium. Until and unless you put that, your values will not match. When we apply a discounted cash flow, it is considered as a controlling stake valuation. Because generally, if I am a shareholder and I am a minority shareholder, then I am not entitled to the entire cash flows of a company. I am entitled to dividends. But you don't do, sometimes the questions come that why don't we do valuation for a minority stake under DCF basis the cash flows of dividends? Because you don't buy shares for dividends. You buy shares for capital appreciation. That is why you value the total company, and basis that total company you arrive the share price. So some factors which are important in comparable companies is very, very important. How do you find comparable companies? I mean, I have seen most of the valuers just googling out, and there are one company or two company which comes comparable, they take multiple and do valuation. You must do a thorough study, thoroughly you should scan. There are industries which are defined under softwares, there are industries which are defined under BSc. You must look at which industry your company is following, what are the total 20 companies, you should consider the multiples of all 20 companies, give it a mean or median. It is a more comprehensive methodology, because all valuations are good until they are questioned. And when they are questioned, then it comes to know in 2 minutes how much in depth you have gone into the model. So comparable companies, be very peculiar. You do not compare your unlisted companies with infrequently traded companies. So when there could be a comparable company, but if that is infrequently traded, we do not consider it as our comparable. We need to look at what are my profit margins, what is my return on equity, what is my return on capital employed vis-a-vis the comparable companies. If my margins are 4%, another company I have taken with 16% margin, there is something problem. You cannot compare too much of differentiation. Then what are the multiples used? A company can value using a sales multiple. See, sales is actually just the top line. As a valuer, we should be concerned about the cash flows of a business, or at least the profitability of it. So again, operating profits are more important than net profits, because at times the net profits of private companies there are so many expenses which are built in. So operating profits are better than net profits. Again, comparable transaction multiple, if you come across that Flipkart is valued at 1 billion, you must find a reasonable data. Because if you do under data limitation, you could fall in trouble. So make sure you are doing a valuation in a manner that you have enough documentary proof for that. Again, in discounted cash flows, the projections must be reasonable. There is a free cash flow to firm approach, there is a free cash flow to equity approach. You must be understanding what is the difference in these two. How do you, like for example, if you are doing a free cash flow to firm approach, you need to arrive at a weighted average cost of capital. However, in case you are arriving, if you are doing a valuation using free cash flow to equity, then you need to apply a cost of equity. So whether you are valuing equity or you are valuing enterprise, if you go back, I mentioned this, right? And typically if you do a DCF valuation, this is how it looks like. I mean, the perpetuity valuation, generally the projections are given for 4 years, 5 years. The perpetuity valuation constitutes the most significant number, maybe 70-80%. So make sure that numbers which are given is a logical number. This is a steps to follow the free cash flow. I am not going into detail. Weighted average cost of capital formula. There is for arriving at a cost of equity, there is a capital asset pricing model. which says that how do you arrive at a cost of equity. So you take risk-free rate, you add beta multiply by market risk premium, and then add a company-specific risk premium. So those of who you would be already doing it, you would be aware of this process. Again, there is a perpetuity formula, basis which we derive at a perpetuity. When it comes to relative valuation, the most important thing is that you need to ensure that the firms are comparable. I just said this before. There are certain rule of thumbs which you will see, which happens like if you are valuing an asset under management company, you are valuing a mutual fund. Mutual fund is having 1,000 crores of AUM, asset under management. There are certain industry guidelines for that. Maybe 4% of equity mutual fund, 2% of debt mutual fund. If you are valuing a hotel, you can assign a value to each of the room. So the entrepreneurs generally know the worth of their assets. Sometimes the formulas don't converge to that level, but you need to look into the industry rule of thumb also, so that how is the valuation coming. As far as the choice of valuation approaches goes, generally we as a valuer we value on a going concern basis, and doing valuation on going concern means that we give more value to the income approach and market approach, less value to the asset approach. If the valuation is for a liquidation purpose, then we give more value to the asset approach and we do not value the cash flows of a business. If I just read para 10.5 of International Valuation Standards, third para here, then it is a valuer's responsibility to choose the appropriate method. And it's also clarified that a valuer should rely more on observable market valuations. A summary which I have tried to depict, that if you follow a particular method, then whether it will result in a minority or a control value, and similarly whether it will result in an equity or an enterprise value. So always keep in mind, if you are applying a EV/EBITDA multiple, it is at an enterprise value. Similarly, because it's linked with market, whenever it's linked with market listed companies, it will always be minority valuation. So make sure, sometimes I have seen we do tend to make mistakes by comparing minority vis-a-vis control value and equity vis-a-vis enterprise value. There are certain valuation adjustments, like I told, discount for lack of control or discount for lack of marketability, which we need to apply. One important aspect is non-operating assets. So always remember, when you are valuing the cash flows of the operations of a business. There are certain non-operating assets which may not get captured in the operations of a business. So what do? For example, if there is a surplus land which is there in a balance sheet, you are not projecting for surplus land. You are projecting only for the operations of a business. So because that surplus land, there could be certain cash balance, there could be certain investments. Anything which is not captured in the cash flows of a business needs to be valued separately. You are not valuing only the operations of a business, you are valuing the company as a whole, which is a summation of your operations as well as your surplus assets. So these are, mistakes which in practice when we see, then these type of mistakes which happen. Then again, startup valuations, if you look into, you will be seeing probability based models is the most practical way of valuing a startups, because every startup wants to be a billionaire. 1%, 2% succeed. Who will succeed? No one knows. We are not magicians. We just have to apply probabilities and do a valuation. Sometimes our probability will go wrong. Sometimes their probability will go wrong. But you have to justify and see what exists on the date of valuation. Flipkart, when it raised valuation round, it raised the valuation round $1 million. The first case when Flipkart got. And the last billion round, it was valued at 16 billion. So it's not that valuation is also at a point of time. When the point of time changes, the valuation changes. Some accounting practices, like just take an example. If my company is an unlisted company and I am comparing my unlisted company with a listed company. My company is not an Ind AS company. Listed companies are following Ind AS. The way accounting is done is different. The accounting could have an impact in the profitability. So while you are comparing auditor qualifications, management discussions, notional tax, income tax benefits, there are huge losses. You have to give additional benefits of losses to the company. Macro trends, micro trends, there are certain intangibles, certain relationships, certain risk factors. Sometimes client gives you a 31st March 2019 balance sheet and asks you to value. Maybe what exists in 31st March 19 does not exist today. You need to look into what stands on the date of valuation when you are signing the report. You need to be clear of the information. Client is not going to tell you if you are not going to ask. So it's very important to have judgment. And just I would be concluding by giving you a couple of income tax cases. See, recently we have seen that tax officers have started questioning the valuations. There is a landmark judgment of Supreme Court in Hindustan Lever which says that so long as a valuer has done justice to the valuation, explained the valuation, it's a reasonable firm with some experience in valuation, it is not the role of the tribunals and courts to interfere in the valuation. So it is a fundamental role that whenever anyone is questioning a valuation, you go back to Hindustan Lever, because there are very less judgments of Supreme Court in India. Tribunals can keep on doing any additions, but this can come to your rescue. If you can defend your valuation, then maybe Hindustan Lever will be helping us. Then again, the same role of court, all the same cases, Mihit, Mafatlal, these are all like old judgments. Every judgment is saying the same thing, that the role of court is not to interfere in the valuation aspect. But recently, if you look into the tribunal judgments, then you look into this DQ Entertainment, Hyderabad ITAT, and here it is saying that a company did a projection, and by the time assessment came, it was 5 years were gone. So at that time, the assessing officer asked for the actual numbers, and assessing officer replaced the actual numbers with the projections. Obviously, projections do not meet. The valuation was 100, it came down to 10. The assessing officer added the 90 rupees. The judgment in this judgment, it was like that valuer has to look at on the point of time of valuation. What happens after the date of valuation is not material if you can justify that there was reasonable belief that this could happen, right? Delhi ITAT judgment again, agro portfolio, where it was the valuer was unable to explain, the company was unable to explain the basis of projections, the valuation was quashed. So basically, if you look into all these aspects, the point is that the financial model is the fundamental of valuation, and a professional needs to get enough evidence and get comfort that whatever I am signing is reasonable. If you try to do it and if you get enough documentary evidence, I think you have done a decent valuation. Rest, always remember that whatever is your valuation, the transaction in market will happen at a equilibrium of demand and supply. And demand and supply keeps on changing. Some companies distress, some companies needing. So depending upon a lot of those aspects, valuation changes, but we should be concerned about a fundamental valuation, following a strict process, and basis that process, we should be able to justify the valuation. That is the role of a valuer. We are not buying a company, selling a company. We are just defending that basis these documents, basis these comparable companies, basis these valuation standards. This is the kind of valuation should be. So there is a great opportunity in the field of valuation. Just look at this tremendous opportunity. Still the standards are being formed. Still so many things are yet to take place. So with this, I am concluding my session. Any person who want to just reach out to me, my details are there. I'd be happy to help you out in this. Thank you so much.